I'm going to talk just a little bit further, and then I'm going to open it up so that we just have some conversation. But I wanted to make it clear the basis. Because we're going to be talking about ego. And I think without touching the basis, for me, talking about ego is, and the reality of it, it's tricky. I personally, I mean, I mention this only because I know some folks know I'm involved with Waking Down. And it's like, oh, I want you to know, I mean, my foundational teacher is actually Papaji, who's a disciple of Ramana Maharshi. Direct disciple of Ramana Maharshi. And my contact with him was very extensive. And so for me, ultimately there is no ego. There is no past, there is no future. And even before I met Papaji, I was very much involved with Tibetan Buddhism, which, and so Tantric Buddhism, and I never stopped doing any of my Tibetan practices after meeting Papaji. I just wasn't doing them in a fashion in which I was seeking. I was doing them some other way. I can't really even say how. Something was continuing to open. And then I got involved with Waking Down. And nothing canceled out anything else. So I'm here to speak as myself. I'm not representing some point of view at all, or representing all the points of view that have been useful to me. It's just, that's it. There's no axe to grind here. The way I experienced reality, all of us, how could you put it into words, right? I mean, but just for the sake of talking, when I'm teaching, often I'll talk about there's been, and this is a very standard Buddhist way of talking, 3 dimensions of reality that are on a continuum. They're not separate. It's just like talking about steam, talking about water, talking about ice. It's all H2O. One dimension is the space that is our identity, that is not even space, it's beyond space. All space is happening in it. We are absolutely free there, and there is never a moment when we aren't free. There is nothing to do in relation to it. There is a realization of it always being the case all the time. And there's nothing that can be said about it, really, other than that kind of stuff. Yeah? You can keep pointing at it, and that's about it. What else is there to do? Nothing. And radiating from that, as soon as you open your mouth, it's like, no, not true, but there's a way in which radiating from it all the time, manifesting as it, is a homogeneous field of energy that becomes many fields of interpenetrating energy. And those fields of interpenetrating energy become more and more dense, and then they appear as multiplicity objects. And in any moment, if we do very much what was happening last time, last presentation, we can just relax into the way in which we are an interpenetrating field of energy. And then the sense of being distinct and contracted and small and in pain unravels. That's having to do with Tantra. Using that actually has to do with both Hindu Tantra and Buddhist Tantra. It's about transformation of the feeling of limits through energy, through recognizing energy. It's really interesting. When I was with Papaji, he was very much, much of the time speaking strict Advaita Vedanta, which, he said he was, if you asked him really, he was like beyond all of that. But people usually interpreted it that way. He was talking strict Advaita Vedanta. So there's very little talk about energy and transmission, presence. It was, there was little talk about that, but mostly it was what's aware of the energy. If you asked about energy, what's aware of it? So it was pointing to that space. So everybody that I knew that used to go to satsangs with Papaji, you'd ask them about, you know, when they were in the States, what teachers they went to see and all of this. And everybody would agree, like, no, it's not, you know, it's really about what's aware of everything. It's not about any subtle phenomena. But when you checked and you asked them, why did you go to this teacher instead of that one? They said, oh, because the energy is so powerful. Right? So there's this side effect when attention is on the spaciousness, which is this kind of radiance and this kind of energy that we feel whenever we gather together in anything like this. And it's very, very nurturing. Tantra takes it on directly and mentions it directly and uses that directly. And then the third piece is that we end up being very dense. And frankly, for me, that really helped, waking down actually helped me a lot with that. Otherwise, I wouldn't even have been attracted to it. But there was something about the acknowledgement of limits, being in continuity with all of that. So the affirmation of the ego. So in some ways, you know, I'm schooled in all of them, and they all are useful. That's all. I just wanted to full disclosure. That's really where I'm at. So let's see. I have some things. 3 things I want to talk about. Ego. Okay. Before we start off, I just want to acknowledge that it really depends on what school to even define what ego is, right? I mean, you know, Freud talked about an ego, and we in the West, we hear the explanations in Indian philosophy. We connect up. Oh, that's the same ego. Sometimes without, you know, kind of sloppy ways. But I think it behooves us to be honest about the fact that we don't know exactly what ego is. It's different depending on the circumstance we're talking about, and to try to become clear, maybe using our own terms or making them up as we go along, but at least be acknowledged that we're not always saying the same thing when we say ego. And to try to be a little specific about, oh yeah, this is my experience. One of the things that for me is important is individuality, in the sense of this. As consciousness, we're all the same. We're simply aware of everything that's arising. And the position or what's arising is so unique and distinct. Like, I have no idea what's arising for you right now. I never will. From your side, what you're experiencing is absolutely unique. Even if all of us were able to be in total no mind at once, sitting here, you'd still be sitting exactly like Adam. Nobody was sitting in exactly the same position you are. Nobody. You'd have to actually, you know, be able to become like translucent and walk right into you and see through your eyes. And nobody's doing that. So what you see is absolutely unique. You are seeing a unique Krishna. You are hearing a unique Krishna. Even if all of us had silent minds, let alone the fact that we have minds that are interpreting it and saying, he's like this, he's not like that, I agree with this, I agree with that, I don't like that, I do like this, and this annoys me, and this is interesting, all that's going on. That makes us all unique. But even if we were totally quiet, we were in a unique position all the time. And that in itself is a basis for recognizing that each of our students, even if we don't call that ego, they have something that's unique, that is worth hearing. That each of us is a sealed mystery in our multiplicity. Whether that's ego or not ego, well, we can talk about that. It could have ego, it could not have ego. But always, whatever somebody says is absolutely worth listening to. Each and every one of us. Because we don't have any access to it except through that being. And even then, of course, we don't know, we still don't know. But they're doing their best to describe it. And doesn't it feel different when somebody actually treats you that way? You know, what does that happen when you speak? You're just like, wow, they're really listening. I really feel like I'm being heard and seen. So is that ego? Oh, I need to have that being seen. Or is that something else? What's going on there? worth looking at there. Somebody early on, my dear friend Hanuman Golden, who gave satsang for years in Portland and in Seattle, a disciple of Papaji. When I first got involved in Waking Down, I was very much involved in his sangha also. And there was a little bit of a disagreement going on between the volunteers. He said, well, you do that kind of, you're very comfortable with people arguing and having egos and talking to each other. Why don't you see what you can do over there? I sat down with him and I thought, how would I be able to explain this to them? I said, okay, we're going to sit in a circle, and we all know that we're consciousness itself, because they were very comfortable with that concept. That was their experience too. They said, so when Laura is going to speak, the only thing we're going to be listening to is what's it like for consciousness itself to become Laura? What's it like for consciousness to be a Laura? And of course, the only one who's an expert on what it's like for consciousness to become, to incarnate as a Laura, is Laura. So that's what we're going to do. So when Laura speaks, whether you agree with her, you disagree with her, you don't, you think, wow, she's crazy, or you think, wow, this is brilliant, whatever. All we're listening for is what's it like to be Laura. And we did it with John, and we did it with Henry. And just doing that creates an entirely different basis. There's no need for disagreement or agreement in that. Okay. I said everything I wanted to say. Thank you. If there's anyone who has any comments or anything you'd like to share, or any outrageous statements of protest?
And I love that definition of Padmasambhava, as all those that have helped us come to this.
Yes.
And then hearing you chant that, your whole talk was worth that. Wonderful. That was just wonderful.
Yeah, the chant was amazing. Thank you. I mean, you probably already are aware, but I was just being in the chant with you and the energy of it, and suddenly I was aware of teachers from thousands of years ago in this space, and I was seeing them and feeling them. It was really amazing and profound. So thank you.
Yeah.
Even Shirley was deeply moved.
Wow.
It was like, I looked at her, she was like,
Wow, that's so
throughout the
cute.
whole thing. When you're done, it was like, all right.
And now she's relaxed.
Yeah, well, and I feel like that's part of it. It's like that woke up the non-think.
Yes.
And then the meditation, the guided meditation, was subject-object. The subject never being object.
Yeah.
That you get to the place where that's not, there's no object to the subject.
Yes.
Nor subject. And that it felt wonderful to not have that defined.
Yes.
That you just kept leaving it. I really appreciated that very much.
And this last piece too of consciousness expressing itself uniquely through each being, we all know that. But to live our lives from that, and that's the crux of it. Yeah, to really see each person as their beautiful expression. And to meet them, hear them from that, not trying to figure out or even know what their experience is, not trying to get in there and interpret their experience.
Right.
Like so many times we do, or happens to me, try to interpret my experience from their perception.
Exactly.
Rather, and I'll say, no. But they stick with that, their perception of what I've said.
Isn't it ironic?
Yeah, and I feel totally unheard.
And they're trying to get you, they think. And it's usually sincere. They're trying to get, but that's not how it works.
Their intention is very beautiful, but it's
But you
a
don't
way
feel
that
that.
we really miss each other.
Yes, miss each other.
Yeah.
We miss each other. Yes.
we don't even want to. You know, it's not that intention that we want to miss each other, but we do in that moment. And we try to interpret it from our perception. And just be with them.
Yeah, people can ask for more if they want, but to just let them be in the space that they are and just hear them.
Yeah. So I was actually taught that, you know, that was a good practice, was to try to get inside a person's perception and understand from that point, rather than not do that. And just be with them, with anyone, in whatever their experience is.
Yeah.
We don't need to understand it or, you know, perceive it.
Or
put ourselves in their
intellectually, right?
shoes.
Exactly.
You know, we don't need to do that.
Yes.
We just need to be.
That in itself is deep understanding. I mean, it's a weird thing. I mean, my experience with this is that as I'm listening, the way, when we talk about, you know, like I said, the three things, the way we exist is interpenetrating fields. With nothing to do in terms of, you could say, interfering help, then field-wise, it opens up. And I feel myself as them, as they're speaking. And simultaneously, right?
That's different, though.
That's different. And simultaneously, I know I have no access to them as the divine mystery. I cannot know what it's like to be them. But my listening is the best that can happen. My allowing them to be.
And the feeling in the body and around the body, we get a felt sense of what's being spoken.
Yes. Now this
But
is
it's still our felt sense.
Thank you. That's what I was. Where was this? The next place I was going. Absolutely, it's still our full sense. I mean, I've had conversations with folks with me. Well, I can feel people. I can feel them. I can feel what you're feeling, Krishna. They tell me. And I said yes. And even if you were the most psychic, intuitive ability to feel every single person in the room, and I'm not denying that this is not a city or a power that happens the more we relax into being. But it'll always be from your side. You'll never feel it from my side. And it's like, oh yeah, right. That's a big difference. This is,
Or not, we don't know.
huh?
Or not.
Or not.
Or maybe not a big difference.
Yeah,
We don't even know that.
We don't know, right?
I know.
Exactly. But the distinction is between saying, it's something like our inherent dignity. You know, that because there is something a little, I know, I'm sure many of us have been around the block, so you may have, and if you haven't, you probably have the pleasure of meeting someone like this in the future, where they are very intuitive and you just feel a little creeped out by it. Like they're telling you what you're feeling and you're like, hey, you know, I begin here and you begin there, can you please not do that? Now that's interesting because in field reality, there's no place we begin and no place we end. But there is a distinction in terms of, in the realm of multiplicity and objects, boundaries are appropriate.
They're very useful.
Yeah.
And they actually lead, not they don't lead, but they allow the other in a very paradoxical way.
There you go.
They enable us to have this conversation.
They allow us to have this conversation.
Right.
They allow the other. So there's a man in the back with his hand up.
Yeah, I just appreciate your orienting us to the person, to the manifest. And not only does the form also reveals being, as well as allows us to see it in others. So I really appreciate your integrating personal and the form with a non-dualist perspective, which for me is uncommon. And I'm curious, is your orientation, which I affirm implicitly, is that something that you're bringing forth in a sense of, for lack of a better word, I don't want to say revelation, but a further evolution, or is it something also inherent in what Papaji was teaching? So I'm curious whether it's... I'm curious whether it's
You have to
expression-
ask such a politically charged question. That's very good.
Subject
So whether this
matter.
is a contribution which the West is making in an
Oh, right.
evolution of the West.
I think this is very good. This is a very good question. And I'll try not to get too heady when I'm talking about this. As I can see, I know I could go there. I do see precedents of it, particularly in Hindu Tantra. Particularly in Hindu Tantra, even more so than in Buddhist Tantra. There's an affirmation of ego in Hindu Tantra that's non-dual Tantra, like Kashmir Shaivism, Trika. That is unprecedented in India. Absolutely unprecedented. It's amazing. It's really, and it is a later development probably, so that might be why. I honestly don't think, now here's a weird way of talking. I actually, yes, it is an evolution, and yes, it is in continuity. It isn't exactly what Papaji was teaching. It's totally inherent or based in what Papaji was teaching. We find ourselves in the same position that all the traditions of non-duality have been in. Where Buddha says something and then the Mahayana says, oh, everything we're saying is exactly what Buddha said, and you go, really? Okay. It's not an evolution exactly, it's something that he secretly taught. Same thing with the Tibetan Tantras, it's a continuity. A weird thing is that I actually feel that, in particular the Tantric traditions in India, in Hindu Tantra, we're addressing exactly, how do you say it? In the unmanifest, there's no distinction. There's no difference, really. So the closer you get to consciousness, to the formless, when you speak about this, the more eternal it is. But in manifestation, there have been developments in terms of even human identity. So people who know world culture, a lot of us experience this, and you can even, when I grew up, and it might be different. Everything is in motion now, so it might not even be true anymore. But when I grew up, there was a huge difference between the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States. And when I went to India in 1992, I noticed there were questions that were not asked, especially outside of the cities in India, but even in the cities, that I was asked routinely as a child. So, well, this is perfect, because it is really about ego. As a child, I was often asked, when I was like 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, in the barber shop, what do you want to be when you grow up? This was never asked to a child who was 4 or 5 in India. And if you think maybe, then go back 100 years, it was never asked. Why? Because, as a 4-year-old or 5-year-old, what happened to me? It's like, who am I going to be when I grow up? Wow, I have choice, there's a future, there's a me that decides, all this stuff, wow, okay.
I'm going to be different than I am.
I'm going to be different than I am, I'm going to become something, and it's my choice. I'm being asked, even at 4. It's like, it's okay for you to dream about being something else, about being something. As a boy. Now again, it was different with women, and this is all part of what I'm speaking about. That the sense of individuated ego, in the way we mean it now, which goes back to what I was saying in terms of what does ego mean? We take an ancient word and we cobbled it together with Freud and we got what we talk about in the West. The sense of an individuated ego, the sense of an individuated person, was a gradual attainment, a gradual evolution that didn't exist in the form it exists now in the past. Even in the West. But in the West, it had some precedence. People who were individuals who said, I'm not a Jew, and were in a Jewish situation, they were outcast just 600 years ago. They were not part of the tribe. Sorry, you're not, or a Christian. I'm not a Christian anymore. You might get killed. Tribal, ethnic sense of who you are is who you are in India. That's still often that way. Who am I? Depends what womb I came out of. I can tell you who I am. I came out of a cobbler's woman's womb, so I'm a cobbler. That's it. Here we are. I'm from this tribe, this is who I am. This distinction shifted over time in the West. So the point now where you have people say, oh, I'm gay, I'm straight, I'm this, I'm that, I decide who I am. Very new sensibility. When I say very new, maybe 1,000 years old. Or even, it's a gradual thing. In the past, people who did this were exiled and killed. And that mutation was wiped out as much as possible, and then the mutation kept happening, until the mutants got together and said, let's form a guild, screw these people, I'm going to do what we want. And they became innovators, powerful people, and it's not all done, it's on a continuity. There are places in the world where there aren't many individual people. So then they say, let's have a democracy. And then everybody votes according to their tribe. And you go, what happened? All they needed was democracy. In our place it works, and we're all individuated people. So if you want to, there are people who talk about it.
There are places in the West, including the United States, where that's still on.
Exactly. Exactly. And
in fact, I would say it's ubiquitous.
It is. So it's all on a continuum. So it's not done, and it's a spectrum. This is what I'm doing by speaking this way, is I'm validating the New Mutants to be part of the Tantric tradition. So in the past, it was like, well, ego was just kind of a tendency to be out of alignment with the tribe, so just get rid of it. It's in the way. I mean, in many spiritual cultures, it's sort of like that, right? But what we're saying is that, no, it's not just in the way. And the Tantric cultures in particular said, no, it's not just in the way, it's fine. The Hindu Tantra really goes, I tell you, Trika is the only one, even beyond, in a way, it has language that's very different than any of the other Indian traditions. Because what it claims is that the ego, your ego, all that's wrong with it is it's too small. That's all that's wrong with it. That if you remove the sense, the I amness gets contracted around a small sense of yourself. And that, now this is different than the space of consciousness. Now we're in the realm of interdependent fields. And contracted and expanded fields, right? The way in which we contract and the way in which we expand. We contract and expand in the field of, in the space of consciousness. In the space of consciousness, there's no change, right? But ego is happening in the field. And in that field, from a Trika point of view, there's a limitation of your sense of I amness. And that sense of I amness is what ego is when it's limited. And then as the sense of limitation there ends, you become larger and ironically more humble. Strangely. You would never think that's the case, because what we usually mean by big ego is a small ego that wants to assert its control. So there's a contracted sense that says, you, stay put, because it feels small, you know? So you got a little Napoleon doing all this stuff, right? This is different. This is the expansion of the sense of individuality so that it includes other in this, and then, in Waking Down, we talk about this in terms of mutuality. When you listen to others and you're able to feel them as yourself without subsuming their dignity as a unique person. So you're opening, but you're acknowledging the mystery of the other as you open. This is more akin to the Bodhisattva, so it's really been worked out more in Mahayana and then in the Vajrayana in terms of the opening of the sense of the self to include more and more. So that's an expansion of the ego. And the Trika, they say that God has the ultimate ego, and that's his consort, the goddess. The sense of I amness is God's personhood or his ego. And it's not separate. This God we're speaking about, Shiva, is not separate from any of us. So it's not like a big guy on a throne and we have to be afraid of because he has this big ego. But he has an ego in which he is all of these beings. So that every being that is suffering is him who is suffering. So he doesn't get away with any of his, it's all his will, but he doesn't get away with anything because every single creature that is suffering according to his will is him suffering or her suffering. Because you can say a goddess is just as easily. It can go either way. But the sense of I amness is expansive. So the sense of ego is expansive for the yogi or yogini. It's about at the level of the fields, at the level of the person, it's about becoming more and more acclimated to being a larger sense of yourself. This really goes very much along with what Sonia yesterday. Sonia, is that the right way?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to acknowledge that. Thank you. I love hearing about this from this perspective because it maps in a different way my experience of the freedom.
Exactly.
The freedom of just being, and I never thought of it as that expanding in the way you described it. That was fabulous.
So this is a marriage. Yes, it's a revelation. Okay, I'll claim it as my revelation. Everybody's got a revelation. This is how I feel. Every one of us is unique. And the way in which you learned things, and the order in which they came to you, even the order in which everyone has common teachers, but they are unique to you because the order and the way you heard them, only you heard them that way. So all of us are in relationship to being that way. We are uniquely receiving revelation, and really it's a great potlatch we have where we can all just become.
Yeah.
I recently came across a very interesting teasing out of what the term manifestation refers to. And I think it's directly relevant to this notion of new revelation or ego developing and so forth. And because we so often talk about the unmanifest manifesting as the world, manifesting as this, as that. And what I came across was the manifestation refers to the way in which being differentiates itself, distinguishes itself, and articulates itself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So this is thank you. I mean, this is all part of one piece. And I want to honor something that I came into late in my own spiritual development is Trika, Kashmir Shaivism, because I really feel that it actually articulates a lot of this. It's like an unpacking of being, right?
Exactly.
And even, now waking down, frankly, actually got me on the track where I could appreciate Trika. So everything just unfolds in the order that you need it to. And and now I'm actually getting more into reading Ibn Arabi as well, which is Sufism, because there's a lot in there as well in terms of unique revelation. In terms of speaking about how God is in relationship to us, the way He's in relationship to every prophet for individual revelation. So he's a Muslim, right? Ibn Arabi, he's a Sufi. When did he live? The 1400s. And as any Sufi or Muslim would tell you, Muhammad is the seal of the prophets, right? He's the last prophet. But see, you read the fine print for these particular Sufis anyway, for this particular point of view. And he said, the evolution of mankind needed laws for all the tribal peoples, all the nations of the planet. And they started with certain prophets like Moses or this or that, but many unknown people that gave people laws that apply to everybody. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, don't lie, all of that. And the last one to do that was Muhammad. It was done. And basically he said, we reached a saturation point. There's no need for any of the prophets who have a relationship with God to tell other people what to do, because everybody knows. We got it. Even whether you're connected, you don't know anything about God, you do know about God, whatever, it's not right to kill. And that's out now. That's done. That's finished. So that's sealed. However, the relationship that each prophet had with God is available to every friend of God always. And your own personal revelation, that is that relationship between you and being, in which things are revealed to you, that continues for everyone. And that is what our life is about. More and more of the relationship to our unique relationship to God. Our unique, and he calls it your unique angel or your unique message that you receive. And then for him, he says, all the Christians are all praying to a different Jesus because they see Jesus uniquely, each one of them. Everyone's praying to a different Allah because they see it differently, uniquely, and yet it's all one. It's this divine mystery in which multiplicity reveals multiplicity. Nobody is going to know being in the way that you do. Nobody. I mean, in terms of the unmanifest, yeah, but you don't even know that. You just are that, right? So there we all abide in God, as God, but without any language for it.
Well, it gives such joy to our conditioning.
Yes.
Because our conditioning is how we come into our revelation.
It is. And that conditioning unravels and unfolds, so there's more to be revealed. It becomes more expansive, more whole, and it becomes closer and closer to the unconditioned, more and more transparent, more and more, I guess, translucent, and I think Peter's words are, what is it? There's an in-between mind, right?
Radiant.
Radiant mind, there it is. It becomes more and more radiant. It becomes more and more transparent to the transcendent. There it is.
I always think of it as like a portal. Like the ego is a portal. And the better you are at having really good boundaries around the ego, then the more presence just comes through it.
There it is. So there it is. So yeah, the piece about your gift, you know, giving your gifts and really being into. So what this means is that at some level, paying attention to what we feel, what it is that we feel, and it's like, my experience of it is that it's allowing yourself to pay attention to what you're feeling and to validate what you're feeling it isn't a straight path in the sense it's more like how a river goes down a mountain than a canal. It's like, you know, if you were an engineer and you went to the top of a mountain, you said, we got a water source, we have this glacier, we need the village down there has to have the water, we'll just run some concrete right down this thing, and bulldoze all those rocks, and then it'll get that. It's not like that. I mean, I wish it was, but it's not. It's like, and of course, the wishing of it is, you know, God knows best. Basically, it's more like the glacier moves around the rock, and it moves here, and it wanders, and it meanders, and eventually it gets down to the bottom. And then as that flow happens, it wears away the bed, the riverbed, so that it becomes wider and more expansive. So it actually changes the river, the mountain, but not the way that a canal does. It does it naturally, just through the flow. So the more that we pay attention to our impulses, you could say, the impulses of being, to the field, and that means being open to input too. What does it feel like when I say this and the person goes, okay, what does that feel like? And they're not, oh, well, screw them, but like, no, I'm also this, and they went like that, oh, okay. But maybe she's wrong. Maybe it's okay to do that. Maybe all that just is like, it doesn't matter. This is how she is. This is how I am. So then it shifts. It changes. And this is true with everybody. You just be open to the field of everybody, but not losing touch with your own sense of who you are and what you need to do. And you keep paying attention to that. And the more you pay attention to that, it becomes clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer. And then you manifest more and more. What you may manifest is simply walking the dog. That's the thing. It isn't about the usual thing of, you know, Tony Robbins, go for it, get it, be somebody. It's not that. It could be that. It could be that. Now some of us go, I don't want it to be that because that's too much. I'll be in the spotlight. And then that's surrender. Because it might be that. And some of us go, I want it to be that, but it isn't actually going to be that. And that's surrender. So we don't know. We're being lived in some way.
One thing that's coming to me more and more is that it's absolutely okay to say, I'm teaching for myself.
Yes.
I mean, at the point that we're at, we know that that's really our highest offering.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Because we also know that it's never only for it. I mean, it's for ourselves.
Right.
You know, and, yeah.
And see, this is the thing, to move forward without fear about ego, about selfishness, about pride, doesn't exempt us from the results of ego, of pride, of whatever. So you will get purified. In other words, we're all assholes at some level. And so whatever we do, you too. So whatever we do, it's like brackish water. You know, when you turn on the water in some houses, you know, you get brown water for a while. The only way to get it clear is to let it be brown for a while. And then it gets clear. So it can be a painful process to go through moving forward with undue expectation and desires and all of that. And we try as spiritual folks often, I mean, I'm speaking from experience, it's like, often it's just like, if I could just avoid that, because, you know, I want to be really transcendental, I don't want to be selfish, if I could just avoid it. But what am I really trying to say? God, don't chastise me, or life, don't show me in the mirror of reality, ego that I have. I'd like to just, like, if I could, in secret, personally, just clean it up before I go out, then I won't have to go through the difficulty of feeling what it's like to know I just did it in front of a bunch of people. So, you know, that what is real humility? Real humility is actually real arrogance exposed. This is us.
There's something that I keep coming back to, and I don't know if it was needed to be said, but the example that you gave about when in conflict within a group, that you're basically perceiving the consciousness of the other.
Or conceiving, it's basically just letting the person be exactly as they are without having to agree or disagree. Like you will.
I wasn't asking a question.
Okay.
I wanted to finish what
Yeah.
I was saying. There's a that it's very different to perceive somebody's the other's consciousness than walking a mile in their shoes, or perceiving their feelings that you're talking about, or sensing and having a boundary to have this thing. It's like, in particularly used with conflict, it gets out of that level of identification with the other and feeling whatever they're feeling and knowing or thinking that you know whatever their position is.
Right.
So there's something about making that leap to seeing the other as the whole consciousness, like that there's a larger consciousness. That's a great exercise on the one hand, and not to get caught up in my being, in my own big consciousness. You know, it's like if I'm going to put my energy anywhere, it's like find the picky little asshole that I am, keeps me humble enough to see the other one's largeness.
Well, yes.
That
I want to caution that though, because it's so, you know, it's just, and it may not be what you're saying, so I might be misunderstanding. But I'm not suggesting that, because for me it's a matter of holding. And when I say holding, I don't mean holding like this. I mean like this. Okay? My own judgments. It's just being with them. So when somebody's speaking, it's just that I'm letting them be who they are. They are who they are. And when they speak, I'm going to have there's going to be judgments. But I don't have to become like them. They don't have to become like me. I don't have to agree with them. They don't have to agree with me. I'm simply listening to them as they are. And that is the way in which I listen to what it's like for consciousness to be a Susan. Because Susan is, by being who she is, I'm hearing what it's like for consciousness to be a Susan. I'm not even asking her to identify as consciousness. I'm just saying, what do you want to say, Susan? And whatever she's saying, I'm simply hearing, this is what it's like to be Susan. Right. Period. Nothing else. And inside I have all kinds of like, she's crazy. That's not what happened. This is going on. That's going on. And I'm simply holding that or being with that, but I'm not relating to her through that. That's.
I got that. I mean, that's like deep listening and being in unconditioned awareness and perceiving the other. But there was something for me, tagging it, that when I'm in conflict, I don't see the others subjectively, subjectlessness, you know, the largeness of it, and that somehow cuts me through the story. Like, I don't want to identify with the other person's story, because then I get all involved. It's like, if I'm not
Right.
I'm seeing the.
So this is really, in a way, you could say that, and this is being able to see others as, without it becoming a conceptual idea, like, oh, they are divine. The way to do that is to be in touch with your own sense of spaciousness. So you just are the space, you know, so this is a simultaneous. I sometimes have an exercise with folks where I have them gaze for a little while and then become aware of peripheral vision. In other words, like what's on the edges of this and what's there, you know? And so this is an easy way for us to get out of being simply what is content to what is aware of the content. And then let's have a conversation and make sure it's actually about our stuff. So that you're simultaneously aware of the spaciousness, but it's your own, because they're your own and their being is the same, right? So there you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. See, a lot of this is, I mean, I've just added in, you know, I can't say that that is what every teacher in Waking Down is doing, but the thing of mutuality, this idea of mutuality, that's what that buzzword is about. It's about recognizing that the only way in which we can really be together is to acknowledge that the other is a mystery and is inherently divine. So we, you know, unless they ask us to get in there and muck up, there is a great power in not doing so.
I know I coined a little phrase, I'm not sure it's the same, but it feels the same to me. Is that I call it like the inner Leatherman tool. And is that no matter what anyone presents or I present anymore, just period, no matter what, they will not be out of my heart, and that includes me. And it allows what you just said seems to happen by just having that presence available. It doesn't feel special either. It feels, that's why I call it Leatherman tool. It's just useful in all situations.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
So, something that kind of dovetails with this, that is going again with ego and a little bit with, I wanted to complete with Sonia and, sir, what's your name?
Michael.
Michael. Is that, for me, the distinction, or what is further, and Waking Down has a piece of this, and my connection of it in an integral sense, or in the sense of Kashmir Shaivism, is just what occurred to me. So, and we're all in this place of speaking unique revelations. The unpacking piece, and this also goes with what you're saying, like the unpacking piece is the last piece that got unpacked recently, is the individuated ego. And so the validation of the individuated ego, the individuated self, as simply being a manifestation of that is particularly tantric and is Trika of all, because Trika is emphatic on saying that, taking the position that all manifestation is real. So, and then you say, well, what about the ego? They say, real too. Well, how could it be? Well, you know, to use modern language, it's real as software. Just because it's not real as hardware doesn't mean it's not real as software. It's like, well, it's just concepts strung together. I can see through it. Yeah, well, that's what computer, your operating system is just ones and zeros strung together. You try operating your computer without one. It doesn't mean that it isn't a thing. So I like to say, you know, being you is the with a thinking mind and an ego and a forward and backward and a global positioning system and a being in Oregon and being in Portland on Sunday at 12:20 is the way that consciousness comes into manifestation. It's not an accident. It's not as though like ignorance is something like, you know, we're battling against, or that consciousness did, oh, what a mistake, it manifested all this stuff and created confusion. At the end, confusion is like, that's totally not non-dual, when you think about it. So sometimes I try to get around the language because people think non-duality means there is no two. No, the word non-dual has the word two in it. It's not just two, you could say. It's non-dual, or it's beyond just two-ness. Sometimes I say that what I'm talking about is the unity of duality and non-duality. So that's really non-duality, but it's non-duality of duality and non-duality. And that's really what Trika is, Kashmir Shaivism. Because it acknowledges that the way that certain manifestation happens, the way that certain things happen, is through a sense of separateness. So the sense of separateness was potential in consciousness itself, and it got unpacked just like form did. So there's a way in which you're not the body. You could say that. Well, I'm not the body. I'm not this body. Okay, good. But we know that there's the ways in which we are, and it's useful in terms of being embodied, in terms of being a whole human being, to be embodied. And it's the same thing with the sense of separateness. Sense of separateness. No, that's not me. If I go to field reality, it disappears. Well, yeah, it's true. But do you always go to field reality? No, goddammit, I'm working on that. Well, it's good to have the skill, the flexibility to go in between states. It's really important. We do each other a service to remind each other that we can go in and out. But the affirmation that different states are all that. They're all that.
Krishna,
Yes.
right now I'm a separate, distinct entity with a compelling mystery that has to be expressed. Right here, it's right here in my physical being. But what it is the same thing as that glass ceiling that you're talking about. It's the same silence. It's the thing that we can't name, but the closest I can come to it is silence. And it's the thing that lives, that seems to live in all of us. At the same time, all this other stuff is going on, and it manifests in a specific place, in a specific person, and demands to be spoken. It's really a mystery. It's really odd. It's just odd.
It is weird. It's not. It is a weird thing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Glad I said that.
So are we.
Let's have more on.
So I want to acknowledge oddness and weirdness. And also, I want to acknowledge the difficulty. I mean, I love what Andrea was saying the other day, that it takes courage. There's something like a difficulty. It's a hero's journey at the level of the manifest being. It isn't always easy. Sometimes we feel lost, we feel confused. We're between plateaus, we're between, I guess the Buddhists, or the Tibetans, they have this teaching called Bardo. It means intermediate or in-between state, and it's between births. And it can be very, very confusing. Some people train their whole lives to lessen the confusion in Bardo. And my feeling is that this is really what, this is identical to death. It's the out of controlness. It's when we're in between states, and then we know that we're actually being lived. We don't always know that, but that's actually the safest. Like, oh, it's a process that's happening. I'm being lived. And the I that feels like it's being lived is along for the ride and surrenders to the I that's doing the living, which is
the big eye.
big I. They say, really who I am, but see that word really makes it sound like the I that's on for the ride is not who I am. And this is the weirdest thing, talk about coming full circle, is that sometimes when I think about this, the archetype of the Lord Jesus Christ comes into mind. Servant, in relationship, I mean, sometimes his relationship to God the Father is played down. It's all throughout it. It's all he was about. If he was here, he'd be talking about him, God. God, 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 God. Somehow, that doesn't come through in Christianity sometimes. But his relationship, he was a servant. And he manifested, and that's why he was the Son of God. He manifested that one through service with great amount of suffering. Yeah? Garden of Gethsemane, tears, feeling abandoned by that one, saying he felt abandoned. He didn't use any expletives. You know, it's like, why did you forsake me? You know, what happened? Where are you? And it's like, okay, I get it. I'm going to have to be killed, but could you please, if you could please do something about it? You know, it's like, I mean, and this is supposed to be the big guy, right? Like, and he's in the sweating great drops. Now, whether any of that happened historically or not, it's just so irrelevant to me. It just has no bearing whatsoever. It's the archetype of it. It's the metaphor, which I'm so in love with. That, you know, we are, and you know, one could say that's the bodhisattva. Right? That we are that. We are divine. We are human. It's a crucifix. It's hard. It's not easy to be here. It's a wound. And there is wellness in it. Deep, deep, deep wellness in it. Deep rest in it. But, you know, this is, it's nice, I mean, because this is about community, right? So it's good to be able to speak about these qualities of it so that we can have support there as egos without any shame about that. You know, that's really important for us to have Sangha as awakened beings. Because I think this is a notion is like, the awakened being doesn't need Sangha. No, the awakened being is in Sangha. We are in Sangha. We need each other. So.
And the example that you give, this is the most important part of the liturgy for me, is that Gethsemane moment, is that the Sangha, he has to walk away from the people to face his doubt, and the place that says, could I get out of this one? You know, do I have to? And can you give me guarantee? And, oh, no guarantee, and you can get out of it, but you get to choose. And it's then you go back into it. You know, it's like I have to take myself out to come to terms with what I'm going to surrender to, with doubt, and take the doubt, and do it anyway, alone and together.
Absolutely.
And surrender all of it, and even in the last minute say, well, why have you forsaken me? It's the last moment. It wasn't like, hey, I got it. Everybody, no problem. That's why it's like, okay, that's why it endures, because it's like,
right?
What?
Right. It
ain't over, baby.
Right. And it's not okay. See, that's the piece too.
You won't be happy. It's heaven. It's
it
gold. It's all this.
You don't know. You know. You don't know. And I love what you said about alone too. That it's really true in a way. You know. Okay, so Sangha is really important, and I'd say it's because sometimes we have to do this alone. So when you go away, you're in the pain, and when you can be in Sangha, then be in Sangha. But there's a certain degree of it that we're the alone with the alone. No one can go there with you. Nobody can be there with you because you're a unique being.
Krishna Gauci used to stand up in front of audiences, and he would just look at everybody, and he would say, together, alone. And then he wouldn't stop. He did it by 10 or 15 minutes. Together, alone. Together, alone. It was such a trip. And he just wouldn't stop, you know. But, yeah.
There it is. Your left foot doesn't move your right foot.
Yeah. It's like, I want to die in a really good way. I mean, I had a heart attack in July, right? And so, yeah. And I want to die in a really good way. I want to be surrounded by loved ones. I want to be thinking of, not even thinking, just in this radiance of being, relaxing and all that. I might be killed by a truck on the way over there and surrounded by strangers and in pain, screaming in the last moment.
Okay.
Oh well. That's the truth. So
gotta go.
So that's, you know, to be real about that, to be sober about that. That's also, if I am, that's also it. But it's not going to be me going, oh, this is also it. It's okay. It's going to be me going, God damn it, Vivian's not here. And that's what is. And that you know, in a sense, that's okay. But I mean, it isn't really okay too. I mean, it's not okay that the Holocaust happened. It's not okay that children become, you know, can be raped. There's a certain degree to which it'll never be okay either, because We live in a universe where children can be raped. That won't change, even if the reform program goes out and everybody changes. We still live in a universe of possible horror. And letting ourselves just feel that, be with that, not embrace it, and not having it be glossed.
Because the horror is often natural disaster. It's not only human.
Exactly. Always.
It's not our preference. Like I had food poisoning like a month or two ago, and in the middle of the night I fell on the ground. And my husband comes in. I'm sitting. I can't sit on the toilet. I have to lean into him, and I can feel like everything's closing in. And I looked at him and I said, "I'm so sorry. I feel like I could die like this, and it's just not how I had it in my life."
There you go.
I'm sorry to leave you with this. It's like, yeah.
So,
but it didn't happen.
So I like to. I like to end with this. Well, I'm going to end reading this again, but right before that, this image of Kuan Yin, Avalokiteshvara, Kannon, Chinrizig, the Bodhisattva of compassion, was male and female, really wonderful image. I heard once that she has two primary faces, and they're facing in two directions. One face is turned towards vast emptiness and is in absolute peace. The other face is turned toward all sentient beings, and that face is weeping 24/7, always. This is called the attainment of one's own awareness. I venerate the Supreme Shiva located in the self, who can be known only in self-experience, who is devoid of the mental torment of fixation on any specific doctrine. I bow to the benevolent one, the destroyer of the flood of conceptual constructs, free of the snare of the mind's imaginings, transcending even the level of the highest bliss. The method of attaining the goal is to be constantly awake to one's own awareness. By this means the sage achieves the state free of differentiation. There is no method other than staying with the awareness of one's own being. Closely maintaining awareness of this alone, the yogi and the yogini will become joyful, resting in the self. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.